Before microwaves hummed, refrigerators hummed softly, if they existed at all, and long before food arrived at the tap of a screen, American kitchens were places of patience, skill, and survival. About 100 years ago, the way Americans ate and cooked was deeply tied to the rhythms of nature, the limits of technology, and the realities of daily labor. Food was not just fuel or pleasure, it was a central pillar of family life, health, and identity. To step into an American kitchen of the early 1920s is to enter a world where every meal required effort, foresight, and knowledge passed down through generations. At the heart of most homes was the stove, often coal-fired or wood-burning. It was the engine of the household, providing heat, cooked food, and even hot water. Managing it required constant attention. Fires had to be lit early in the morning, fuel carefully rationed, and temperatures judged by instinct rather than knobs or digital displays. A good cook was admired not only for flavor, but for control, knowing when the oven was just right, without any thermometer. Breakfasts were hearty, designed to sustain long hours of physical work. In rural areas, mornings often began with eggs collected minutes earlier, thick slices of bread with butter or lard, oatmeal or cornmeal mush, and strong coffee. Bacon or salt pork was common, especially among farming families. There was little emphasis on variety. Instead, reliability and nourishment mattered most. Children drank milk, often fresh from the family cow or delivered by a local dairy. Lunches were practical and simple. For factory workers and laborers, meals were packed from home, sandwiches of bread and cheese or meat, apples, boiled potatoes, or leftover stew wrapped in cloth or paper. There were no vending machines, fast food chains, or takeout counters as we know them today. Eating out was rare and usually reserved for travelers or city dwellers with modest means, such as diners or lunch counters serving basic fare. Dinner, or supper, was the most important meal of the day. It brought families together and represented the culmination of hours of preparation. Soups, stews, roasted meats, and seasonal vegetables were common. In winter, meals relied heavily on preserved foods, canned beans, pickled vegetables, dried fruits, smoked meats, and root crops stored in cellars. Fresh produce was a luxury outside of harvest seasons, making preservation skills essential for survival. Food preservation was a defining feature of American cooking a century ago. Refrigeration was limited and unreliable. Iceboxes were common in urban homes, requiring blocks of ice delivered regularly. Rural families depended on cellars, smokehouses, and pantries. Women spent weeks each year canning fruits, vegetables, and meats in glass jars, sealing them carefully to last through harsh winters. Mistakes could be deadly, as spoilage and contamination were real dangers. Regional differences strongly influenced diets. In the South, cornmeal, greens, beans, and pork formed the backbone of daily meals, influenced by African American culinary traditions and Native American practices. In New England, seafood, potatoes, bread, and dairy dominated. The Midwest relied on grains, beef, and root vegetables, while immigrant communities in cities introduced flavors from Italy, Eastern Europe, China, and beyond. These influences slowly blended into what would later be called American cuisine. Immigration played a crucial role in shaping food habits. Newly arrived families often cooked dishes from their homelands, using whatever ingredients they could find. Italian immigrants made pasta with local wheat. Jewish families adapted traditional recipes to American markets, and Chinese communities created new versions of familiar dishes. Over time, these foods crossed cultural lines, becoming part of the broader American table. Cooking was labor-intensive, especially for women who bore most of the responsibility. A single meal could take hours from start to finish, washing ingredients, chopping by hand, stirring constantly, baking and cleaning without modern detergents or dishwashers.
Recipes were rarely written down in precise terms. Instructions like cook until done or add a pinch relied on experience and intuition rather than measurements. Children learned about food early. They helped shell peas, churn butter, knead dough, or peel potatoes. Food education was practical and constant, woven into daily life. Children understood where food came from, how it was grown, and what happened when it was wasted. Nothing was thrown away casually. Leftovers were reused, bones became soup stock, and stale bread was transformed into puddings or crumbs. Economic class deeply affected eating habits. Wealthier families enjoyed more variety, access to imported goods, and hired help. Middle-class families balanced nutrition with budget constraints. Poor families often struggled, relying on cheap staples like bread, beans, and potatoes. During hard times, especially in the years leading up to the Great Depression, hunger was a constant fear. Even so, meals were shared, and hospitality was valued. Offering food to a guest was a sign of dignity, even when supplies were scarce. Food also carried emotional and cultural meaning. Sunday dinners were sacred in many households, featuring special dishes and extended family gatherings. Holidays were marked by traditional meals passed down through generations. Thanksgiving tables, though simpler than today's, represented abundance and gratitude. Christmas baking, communal meals, and shared recipes strengthened bonds and created lasting memories. Health and nutrition were understood differently. Vitamins were not widely discussed, and dietary science was in its infancy. People ate what was available, not what was optimized. Yet many diets were naturally balanced due to reliance on whole foods, physical labor, and limited sugar consumption. Obesity was rare, though malnutrition existed in poorer communities. As the 1920s progressed, change was already underway. Electric stoves, refrigerators, packaged foods, and advertising began to transform American eating habits. Convenience slowly replaced necessity. Cooking became faster, but also more detached from raw ingredients. What had once been a daily act of survival began shifting towards efficiency and consumption. Looking back, the food and cooking habits of Americans a century ago reveal more than recipes. They reveal values. Patience, resourcefulness, respect for labor, and an understanding of limits shaped every meal. Food connected families, cultures, and generations in ways that modern convenience often obscures. In a time when meals now arrive instantly and kitchens are filled with machines, the American table of a century ago reminds us that food was once an act of intention. Every bite carried the weight of effort, time, and shared responsibility. And in that simplicity, there was a depth of connection that still resonates today.